Hey y'all, it's your girl Megan. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about books I've read and compare them to their movie adaptation. This week it's late again, but I'm doing Twilight. Ooh, my bookmark. Twilight. Bro, I read this book, I don't know, middle school, freshman year of high school, and I feel like I read it in a day. This literally, I was dragging through it. I don't know what it was this time, but anyway, that's why it's late. I literally finished it last night, and then watched the movie today. So, without further ado, I shall talk about the movie. Can we all just agree that this movie was like subpar, if not complete garbage? I mean, I guess they got most of the components of the book. It was just very accelerated. And then also, like, some things were just kind of like out of order. Like, they talked about this like at this point in the book, but at this point in the movie, it was just kind of jumbled. So I feel like they like jotted down the big parts of the book, and then they're like, okay, let's put this one here in the movie and this one down here, and like just kind of mixed it up however they wanted. So let me know what you thought. I watched this on Freeform with commercials, so I don't know if things were edited out. It was Twilight the Extended Edition, so I don't know how different that is from just the Twilight not extended. I already said without further ado, and I still haven't started yet. Okay, so the movie opens with a visual of one of the vampires. I'm assuming it was Emmett, and he was hunting. Of course, you don't get that in the book. And then Bella sees Billy Black and Jacob during the sale of the truck. In the book, she just knows that he bought a truck and doesn't really know where it came from at that point. But like literally right when she gets to Charlie's house, like they pull up and they sell the truck and she like talks to Jacob. So that's just something we don't get in the book, and it kind of shows that connection earlier on, which I actually liked, because I was reading this book and I'm like, bro, is she even friends with Jacob? Like, I was 100 pages in. I'm like, I thought she was close with this Jacob dude. He's not even in it yet. So I like that he was introduced earlier on in the movie. That's one thing I liked about the movie. Okay, so Edward's reaction when he first meets Bella was so over the top in the movie. I could not. I was cracking up. He's like, oh, I couldn't. Ugh. Who filmed that? It was like, perfect, let's keep it going. I don't know. It was so dramatic. And so then that night, they went, not even that night, pretty much anytime it showed Bella and Charlie eating dinner throughout the movie, they were at the diner in town. Whereas in the book, it specifically said like she cooked for him every single night. So that was a difference. And then another difference was in the movie, she would call her mom, where in the book, she would email her mom. And then also, she just gave a lot more information to her mom and was more honest with her mom in the movie, whereas in the book, she's just like, yeah, everything's great, blah, 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 like trying to placate her. Okay. So, that bullet point was wrong, so I'm just going to skip it. And then it shows a couple of the scenes of the bad vampires. I don't know what to call them besides the bad vampires or their names, Victoria, James, and Laurent. But it showed scenes of them hunting like 2 different people, I think. And so at this point in the movie, it did show that, and that didn't happen in the book. I'm pretty sure they didn't kill anybody in the book. Or, yeah, they just showed up at the baseball game. So this was just added into the movie for drama, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe they'll mention it in the second book that there were murders. I don't know. But that was not mentioned at all in the book. And then here we not only hear about these other vampires, we see them in action, which is definitely different, because in the book you only get Bella's perspective. And then so they have one conversation in the movie in class, Edward and Bella, and they're already walking together after class. They had one conversation. In the book, they had that whole conversation in class, and then he bolted. Like, he ran out of the area still. So their relationship was definitely accelerated as well, but it was a movie. This book was 500 pages, so much happened, so of course it's accelerated. And then, next bullet point is, oh snap, he saved her from the truck already. This is accelerated. The accident was slightly different than the book, though. I think, although I had a hard time like picturing it in the book, like he lifted the truck off her legs, and like I just I couldn't picture it, so I think it was slightly different than the book, although who knows. And then I was just kind of creeped out, like it showed that Edward was already watching her sleep, because like they talked like twice. And the book didn't exactly state when he started watching her sleep, but I didn't think it was like that dang early. Like that was kind of creepy. And I know a lot of people are like, it's romantic, but I always thought him watching her sleep was creepy, but whatevs. So one thing, this isn't really in order, but one thing overall I thought of the movie was that she's kind of like moody and introverted, like Bella's character. But in the book, she's more strong and stubborn and funny. She's like got a personality. So they just really dulled her down, and I was disappointed. So there's no Sadie Hawkins dance in the book. I mean, in the movie. In the book, there's a Sadie Hawkins dance, and then later on at the end, there's a prom. The movie just skips the Sadie Hawkins dance, and the whole time they're talking about prom. And then her excuse for not going to the prom and saying no to like the dudes asking her out was that she's flying to Jacksonville that weekend, not going to Seattle, which is a much better excuse because she could go to Seattle any weekend, but if she has tickets to fly to Jacksonville, that's a much more valid excuse. And then I was asking, does that mean there's no scene of prom at the end? Because she didn't go to the Sadie Hawkins dance in the book, and then she went to prom. But since there was one dance, I was just wondering if they would still include it, and they did. So I can ignore that question. And of course, they inserted a random field trip, because what's a movie about high school without a field trip, even though that wasn't in the book and didn't make a difference at all. And then I laughed at the scene of him catching the apple. It references the cover of the book, but it never actually happened in the book. It showed there were lots of instances with his fast reflexes and whatnot, but that was not one. And then there was no scene of her almost fainting in class when they were pricking their fingers with blood, and then him carrying her to the nurse. And that was honestly one of my favorites of the book. And so I was disappointed that they cut that out, where he ditched class and then he saw her like weak on the sidewalk, and he just scooped her up and carried her, and like I was disappointed they cut that. But again, 500-page book, so I understand. And then when they do their beach trip to La Push, everyone like went surfing, which was different than the book. It looked cold. Like, I don't know, do people surf in that weather? But they all went surfing, and then that's how Bella ended up talking to Jacob. In the book, they just kind of ventured off different ways, went to look at a tide pool. By the way, I really want to see a tide pool now. I've never seen one, and it sounds magical. So I was mad that I didn't get to see one in the movie. I'm going to have to YouTube it later. But anyways, and then only one guy asked Bella to the dance instead of all three. I forget who in the movie. They're so like interchangeable, I feel like. But in the book, it was Mike, Tyler, and I forget the third guy's name, but they all asked her to the Sadie Hawkins dance, even though it was a girl's choice. But it was just like, ooh, everybody wants Bella. But that wouldn't have been as believable in this movie because Bella is a dud. So it makes sense that only one did. Anyways, shade. Okay, so when they go to Port Angeles, Bella and Jessica and Angela, and then she says to them she wants to split up so she can go to this bookstore. But in the book, she just kind of walks by it, and she's like, oh, that place does not look like my cup of tea, and she just walks past it. But in the movie, she actually goes into the bookstore and buys a book, and that's where she learns the phrase cold one. whereas in the book she learned that phrase from Jacob. Jacob told her they were called cold ones, but in the movie she learned it from the book, and I think that just kind of more justified them getting separated, because if she just said she was going to go to this bookstore and never went, people would be like, they're just inflicting drama, which, I mean, it kind of did, but whatever. So that was just different. And then the scene with her near mugging, I just thought those guys would be older. I'm not really sure why. It didn't really say anything. And then in the book, Edward never got out of the car. He just like reached over and opened her door. She got in and they drove off. But he got out and like was facing them off in the movie. Drama. On their way back from Port Angeles, they stop by the police station and learn about another animal attack, which is the bad vampires, which of course didn't happen in the book. And then the scene in the woods, the iconic scene from Twilight in the woods, did not happen like that in the book. They were just talking about it at lunch in the book, not very dramatic. But in the movie, she's all like, I know what you are. And he's like, say it, a vampire. And they're like in the woods, and it's like this big scene. But like it wasn't that big of a scene in the book. And then it goes straight into showing her what he looks like in the sunlight. In the book, he says, like, he's just like, that's a myth. We don't burn in the sun. I'll show you later. And then that's what they do, I believe, when they're supposed to go to Seattle. So the day of the Sadie Hawkins dance. But he just says, I'll show you some other time. But she says, you're a vampire. And then he shows her right away. And that whole scene in the woods was just so over dramatic, where he's like, I could run fast. I'm strong, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you're so over dramatic. That is not how it was in the book. He was calm in the book, just like. And then she goes to meet his family, and they're making her dinner. I thought that was so funny. That was not how it happened in the book, but it was funny. And then she said she ate, and Rosalie got mad and broke the bowl. Love it. And then Edward's family talked about how it would be bad for them if things didn't end well. But in the book, Edward was the one to bring that up to Bella about how, like, if he ended up hurting her, his whole family would have to move, and it would reflect on all of them. But in the movie, the family brings it up, which is kind of like, okay, but I guess trying to take some of the hate off Edward, I don't know. And then the spider monkey scene never happened in the book. So awkward. Spider monkey. That is not a cute nickname. He pretty much tells her how someone becomes a vampire, which he didn't want her to know in the book, and he was very upset that Alice told her. But he straight up tells her. He kisses her for the first time in her room instead of out in the woods. There is no scene with Edward, like, telling Bella to tell Charlie about him. It just kind of seems like she wanted to tell Charlie herself, which was not the case in the book. The baseball scene was the best in the movie by far. If you disagree, comment below. I'm trying to wrap it up because this is taking forever as always. When they leave the baseball field, Edward and Bella are alone in the Jeep instead of with Alice and Emmett. James used a different home video to lure Bella into meeting him. It shows the fight between Edward and James, which is very different because in the book, she was just kind of like half dead. Not half dead, but like half conscious. And so she just kind of heard noises of fighting while she was like in and out of consciousness. But of course, with a movie, it's going to show that. It's not going to like be a black screen. And then I was happy, like I said, that they do still go to prom. But the difference is that Jacob shows out outside of prom, sent by Billy to say break up with Edward, rather than inside the prom and like dances with her. And then one more thing that I just thought of, James never mentions how Alice was turned, and that he knows basically what happened with Alice and that he turned her. So there was no backstory for Alice. There was no backstory for Carlisle. There was really not much backstory at all. There's so many things that I did not talk about so many differences. Like I said, it's a huge book, very short movie. So if you think of anything I missed, feel free to comment below. I just thought of a couple more, but I'm at that 15-minute mark. So I will be back next week. What's the next one called? I'll be back next time with New Moon. Is that the second one? Or is it Eclipse? Whatever. I'll be back next week with Twilight 2. Okay, peace and love. Bye.